So it's the House Transportation Committee. We're continuing our work today. And we are continuing our work on the FY25 proposed budget, transportation budget. And we invited Andrea Wright and Bradley Kuchenberger to come back into the committee. You didn't get through your presentation completely when you were here last week, and we wanted to have an opportunity to go back and to kind of more clearly understand where things were going. So I'm going to let you, I'm not going to explain it. I think you probably have a clearer explanation. So thank you for making the time to come back.
Thanks. Yeah. Andrea Wright, Environmental Policy Manager at V-Trans.
And I'm Bradley Kuchenberg, Financial Officer for V-Trans.
So yeah, we were in last week and presented some of the information about our proposed 25 budget for the Environmental Policy and Sustainability Program. There was a number of questions. And so I have added a few slides. I will say I'm going to talk today about the carbon reduction program and the PROTECT program. Patrick is much more versed in our electrification program. So my understanding is you have him slated to come in next week or are working on that.
Well, we'll see. I don't know if we have him slated yet, but
Okay.
if we have questions, we can have him come back in.
Okay. I took those slides out, so you probably want to have him back in.
Okay.
That was my understanding. He's definitely available next week. So just so you know what slides are in here. So the aim of this is to provide a little bit more detail and a breakdown of the numbers, and hopefully that gives you a little more clarity of how this is all working. These, of course, being new programs, environmental policy and sustainability overseeing those, but then they're really being implemented through all the programs. So it's a little bit of a different structure. And so we started last time with just some of the changes in the budget, the proposed budget from what was approved last year to what we're proposing this year. And again, I just kind of added the notes to the slide just to kind of describe what was going on there and the reasons for that. A small increase in the state funds represents staffing. The big change in the federal funds is because state fiscal year 24 included approximately previous years of federal funding for both the carbon reduction program and for the NEVI program. And those were targeted for electric vehicle charging infrastructure. The state fiscal year 25 proposal includes just 1 year of the NEVI, and the CRP funds are not showing up in the environmental policy and sustainability.
Yeah, that's great. This is a great note. Can you just give us the dollar figure of the 2 years of federal carbon reduction program? And
We will get to that. We
Okay.
have much more breakdown of that later.
Super.
Great. And then, of course, that local funds going down that much is because the local match for those, the charging infrastructure, the match for those comes from local vendors. So that goes down when the federal funds for those go down.
Does the committee have any questions on that slide, or maybe we should move through it and we might come back to this if we need to? That sounds good. Representative Hoach?
Yeah, I
Thank you. So in this slide, the local really is only associated with the NEVI. And you're saying the local is, the supplier of the equipment, puts a
Exactly.
little in. So that's more than 50% drop.
Right, because
If
we
it
were
was 2 years
showing,
and 1 year, I would think it'd be 50%.
so we're not just looking at the NEVI funds from state fiscal year 24, the carbon reduction program funds were also being slated for charging. So it's much more than just the drop in the NEVI funds.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. It is warm in this room.
No, sorry.
It's not done on purpose.
Okay, yeah, so this is just sort of the breakdown. Really, the large portion of the federal funds being from the NEVI, which is state fiscal year 25 proposal. And then the next largest piece of the pie for the mileage-based user fee. And then again, because of those local dollars that would match the federal dollars, those local dollars aren't showing up in the state funds, of course. So the big piece of the state funds pie is the match for the mileage-based user fee. We okay with this one?
Yeah, so I think I'm just ingesting it.
Yeah.
To make sure it's.
Yeah, I think we can definitely just call
Yeah.
each of these slides.
Yeah.
A little bit on most of them.
Folks. Taking this in. So you break down, Representative
Yeah,
George, go
thank
ahead.
you. Yeah, you can see I can see the question always now. So the competitive and buff grant, this was to sort of study how to go about
It's an implementation grant.
it, right, okay, yeah, and
Mileage-based,
how to-
and we have been studying that for some time now.
right, okay. Thank you.
Representative Burke.
And the grant has been received?
No, it has not. We are anticipating that it will be here this year that we can apply for. And like I said, we've done a lot of work, so we're anticipating having that. We showed it in our state fiscal year 24 budget too, so we didn't want to completely take that out. We are anticipating all of that money, that $3 million from the federal grant coming so that we can implement a program.
And remember that was in our T-bill last year to commit to the funding for the, the match for the grant, so to be able to do this work. And I think you were anticipating getting word by now, right? That,
We were,
yeah, I know, that's the feds, right? I mean, any sense of when you'll hear about that? Is it the spring? Is that what I'm hearing? Yeah.
we're hearing, yeah.
So might have an impact. Representative Lally?
Just wanted to clarify, so the 1.4 million represents our match that we're just holding for that, is that, or is that the?
The 1.4 million will be the federal portion and 350 for the state match for that.
In the middle
Oh,
column.
sorry,
Yep.
right, sorry, yep.
Yeah,
In the
it's
wrong-
good.
yeah.
It's good. It's good to get that, yeah.
Yep.
Representative Bartholomew.
What's an MBUF?
Mileage-based user fee.
We talk about it in speak in acronyms, so sometimes it's helpful to unpack them. So, yeah, and then the CRP on this is the carbon
Carbon
reduction.
reduction program, the NEVI is the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure, the PROTECT is a long acronym for resilience. And then the EPWP is federal dollars that we have for planning funds.
Okay. Are folks okay? Thank you for pausing.
Sure. We think we have plenty of time we can pause on. You saw this slide last week. Also, all I'll say about that is, we've got the 32 million overall for the life of the carbon reduction program. We went through the process of developing a carbon reduction strategy, and you can see the 3 recommendations that came from that for the funding. And then for state fiscal year funds, this is where it got confusing last week. When we had slated those for EV charging, we pivoted because of the recommendations that came from the carbon reduction strategy and are now looking to put those out through 3 different programs. The Bike Ped program, $4 million, transit electrification, $4 million, and then fleet electrification and charging infrastructure for our own assets at the agency. That's $2.5 million.
Okay. I know that this slide, I think you break.
I break it down a lot more in the next slide.
In the next
We
slide.
can certainly pause on because there's a lot of information in the next slide. But so, yeah, I just wanted to kind of briefly talk about that one. Maybe I should get through really high level the next 3 or 4 slides, and then we can talk about carbon reduction program altogether.
That sounds like a good one.
And then, the proposal now for the state fiscal year 25 funds is just what's kind of shown in that side box is the program oversight that's coming through the environmental policy sustainability, the funds that are related with the carbon reduction program from our program. And then also we will be implementing $3 million for the mobility and transportation innovation grant program.
So I have a quick question about, because to surround the committee, we got this report on the carbon reduction strategies for the carbon reduction program. And you pulled it out into these buckets.
Yeah.
Is the way that that federal program works, are there requirements in that federal program about what is eligible, and what
Yes.
isn't eligible?
Yes.
So like is like electric vehicle incentives, are those,
That's a gray area, and it is a definite, it's clearly eligible for, public assets. The private assets, like actually doing incentives for e-bikes or anything else is a gray area.
is it great because like a lot of federal programs, the guidance continues to roll out, like it's not all clear at the outset, or is it?
It's really confusing the way that language is written, so if we were to propose something like that, we would need to get, approval from our federal highway office.
Versus like knowing if it's really clear, then you know that you don't need the approval.
Right.
Okay, I'm just,
Yeah.
part of my own education of how this program
Yeah,
works.
and I think even at the state, federal highway offices, they're often going back to headquarters to get
Clarify.
make sure that it's being implemented consistently throughout the nation.
And this was not a competitive grant, right? This is
This is formula funding.
this is formula funding.
So this is the slide that you might just need a little bit of time. There's a lot of numbers on it. But really this is, to try to provide that greater level of detail that you, were sort of craving last week when we were in and I didn't have for you. So, what we're showing here in the top section is the apportionment. And then the funds that are available for obligation through each of the federal years. And then in the lower section, what has been passed and is proposed for obligating, and the programs and the activities, that we are proposing them for. So again, looking at the fiscal year 24, the $4 million for bike ped, the $4 million for transit, and the $2.5 million for public fleet electrification. And then again, looking at state fiscal year 25, the $3 million in transit for the MTI program, and in both those years, just support from the EPS program.
I mean, is the MTI and the transit for FY 24, not 25?
The 24 funds for transit are the e-sprinters, so capital
I
programs.
see over on the right, I'm
Yep.
sorry. Yep.
Yep, and then 25 is for the MTI.
So I'm seeing nothing in transit under FY 25.
Nope, it's federal fiscal year 24 dollars that are going to be, are proposed for state fiscal year 25.
Okay, that is helpful. That's like, so this is
I love those.
federal, yeah, it's
Years.
The years are not-
that don't line up, right? So FY 24 is for state fiscal year 25.
Yes.
Is everybody following along with that? Representative McCoy, I see you're shaking your head.
I don't know what you're talking.
So on the
Top line,
so
just the top line in general, just generally you're speaking.
yeah, generally speaking, because where my question was to see where it says transit.
Yeah.
And then you go all the way to the right, it says state fiscal year 25 TDM micro transit services. And if you look under, oh, it's because of the top of the slide is a different column than the
Yeah.
state. So I was my eye was confusing the two. Because it says federal
Yeah.
fiscal year 24.
I
is state fiscal year
have
25.
these charts separated and I thought it was better to put them
It's
together.
good.
so you
No, it
can
shows
see how they go
where the
together.
alignment is. So I just wasn't used to look my eye doing that. So
Yeah,
thank
so
you.
that top part really is separate to kind of digest. This is what we have been apportioned and is available to go out. And then the bottom part is what we plan to do with those.
Yeah.
And what we have.
That's a question about that.
Yep.
But so they're aligned in a sense though, because the fiscal year leads into the first half of or the second half of the fiscal year, the state fiscal year.
Right.
That's below it.
Yeah.
Yes, so when we have when a quick rule of thumb when you're talking about federal fiscal years versus state fiscal years. A federal fiscal year, if you add one number to it, will equate to the state fiscal year we're able to budget those dollars in.
Got it.
Just given the timing of the legislative session when we actually receive our federal apportionments and all of that stuff.
So there's a logic to why you put one. But
Yeah.
it looks like it's shifted over, but in fact, it's the same time. Ish.
Representative Lally?
Yeah, Bradley, I just wanted to ask, do these, do the funding, is it like on a rolling basis? Is there any predictability about like what happens when?
Yeah, for this program, it's pretty stable. As you can see, we know of our excuse me, FHWA formula funding. There's going to be across the top line, that number of apportionment, each particular fiscal year. So that was agreed upon when the 5-year bill was in.
Okay.
So there is predictability in a sense there. Where there's less predictability is more when we're actually expending the money and doing the construction project, what year it aligns with, when the money actually goes out the door, when we build the feds. Like that's a little bit different, but from a budgeting perspective, it is quite predictable.
On the intake.
Yeah.
Well, less predictable on the.
Yeah, and our conversations here, it's more predictable when it's actually out in the wild to be constructed. It's less,
A while.
it's less predictable.
So I think the confusion last time we were in this, I think this slide is helpful. Is that the committee was concerned around the carbon reduction monies that had been, that we see here where they're being recommended for the state fiscal year 24.
Yep.
And I think I recall that you both were saying, but Bradley was saying, that money in the state fiscal year 24 was rolled up in part of the environmental policy budget that was included in last year's budget.
Right.
And because of the guidance the clarity around this federal fund, you now know more clearly because of the report, the strategy and the report that you did, you now know where that money can kind of go.
Right. Yeah.
So what does it mean for in a way, this is clear. In a way, it's too bad because neither you nor we got credit for adding money to this current year, right? For Bike Ped. Bike Ped is really popular, right? Everybody wants to see it happen. I want to just surface that, in a way, we passed the budget. Now we get to say, because we're hearing that there's more demand for that program than there was funding. So just from from our town's perspective, what will that look like is there an additional grant application, an additional, or is it just added on top to the funds that are available, that will be available?
It's not going to be separate. It's going to be added
onto the pot.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what is the timing of those grant proposals?
That is spring.
Okay.
So it should, I can't remember the exact amount. Joel and I were talking about this, but I don't know the exact amount that was already,
It says it right there, spring 24. Yeah, so
well, spring 24 from this program will be 4 million, and it's about the same. That was already planned for the Bike Ped grant program. So it should be somewhere in the $8-9 million.
the total pot.
for
I
the
think
total available.
I think we're gonna have you come in, some folks come in separately to present on all the different Bike Ped programs and where that, or maybe, I don't know if that's something that you're gonna cover today, because I think one of the questions I heard from the committee last time was if that Bike Ped money is coming, it's great, but we're hoping that it can be added in addition to and not just backfilling what we've already done. I know it's a tough fiscal year, but if it's about carbon reduction, adding to our strategy to add to doing that more, is that what it's going to accomplish? It
Yes, because it's allowing for twice the amount of.
will be twice the amount.
Yes.
Okay, I think that was the big question that we did.
If these carbon reduction program funds were not going to Bike Ped, if they were going to electric vehicle charging, like we had said, you would only see $4 million going out, $4 or $5 million going out in the spring round, this 24 spring round. And now it should be, $4 million more than that.
Okay, so it's additive. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Representative Lally?
I just want to ask one question about, it would be great to have a kind of return on investment sort of metric that for adding a Bike Ped facility in this location translates into
Yeah,
X amount of, just to make it really help people understand
exactly.
everything and just so much more clear.
Right, and we,
That's possible.
you may remember, or you may not remember from the carbon reduction strategy presentations that we've done, we developed a methodology for figuring out what these recommendations should be.
Yeah.
And so we have a very complex tool that all these project parameters can go into, and they estimate, it's it's a planning model basically, to say what we could expect for carbon reduction from those facilities. And so we are looking, our group is really looking to get some dashboarding up about,
Perfect.
transit has a little bit now. We have a little bit for parking rides, but we might not have the exact metrics we want for this. So we, as in all these groups, all these sort of transportation demand management and carbon reduction programs are looking to get that out. So we know what we're getting exactly for our return on investment.
And we will be happy as legislators to communicate this to our communities and with links and all that stuff. So they can
Yeah,
take a look.
it's certainly going to take time to build. We have that tool, but we have to sort of coordinate all the inputs.
I'll be reporting that it's in the pipeline.
Yeah.
So another question here,
So just kind of get it up here.
Yep.
So we'll never really actually see the FY 24 money listed anywhere, but it will be in your bike ped program. Is that true?
Yeah, I think that would be if we're talking about the mechanism by which it would expend those funds, it wouldn't necessarily show up in a budget that goes through.
Wouldn't be in a column.
Yeah, the way we would propose to do this, I'm not saying it wouldn't or it doesn't have to. There's kind of two mechanisms by which we could expend these federal dollars in that program, given that they were appropriated in environmental policy and sustainability. One is that, maybe there's three. The first is that the nexus between this dollar in environmental policy and sustainability is equivalent to or connected to the bike ped program through the carbon reduction plan that Andrea said. I don't know if we would go that route or suggest that route. Instead, I think we'd probably suggest spending the funds out of the bike ped program. And to do that, we would request additional, what's called excess receipts for the federal dollars in order to actually expend the program. Did I misunderstand your question?
Well,
Seeing perplexity.
I'm just trying to catch up with you.
Okay.
very detailed.
Sorry, yeah, I'm being too detailed.
At this level.
Yeah, so, okay, all right.
If I look at last year's budget,
Yeah,
look up the bike ped program, there'll be a number.
yeah,
It was, but there'll be a number. But I can then say, but it's this number
yeah.
plus an additional $4 million that's being handled.
That would be the more appropriate way to say it.
That's the way to say it.
It'd be, yeah, fiscal 24 dollar plus. What are we talking about? Bike ped plus 4 million is the real number that you're gonna see if you looked at our actual expenditures.
Let me just jump to this slide because I don't have that slide for the bike ped. We weren't able to pull it together. But we have it for transit electrification funding. So it's sort of showing that what we've done in the past and where we are with transit electrification. And then you can see there was already some money planned for state fiscal year 24, and we're adding another line for state fiscal 24 for the carbon reduction programs.
I think there were a couple of other questions that Representative Corcoran and then Representative Burke, and I don't know if it's related to this or the previous slide.
Yeah, just a quick question, while they're almost doubling the funding in this program now. How are we meeting the demand? Is this gonna fund 80% of the applications now, or?
That would definitely be a better question for
Yeah.
Joel, who
Do we have a feel, or just throw money in there?
So I know there was some, an article last year, and I hesitate to even talk about this because I can't remember the exact amount, but I think, we've had a similar amount that was planned for this year, and it was around $4 or $5 million. And I remember the article saying like, we left $15 million on the table. I talked to Joel about that. He said that's somewhat accurate. Not all those projects would have been, they were applications but they would not necessarily have been approved under and eligible for the funding. So there's a little bit of factor in there, but that sort of gives you the ballpark of what we're
50%,
talking about.
60% maybe.
Yeah,
So we could, I think what I was gonna do, I think on our, we're gonna have some testimony coming in with Joel. I think I think we fund Bike Ped in a number of places. And so to be able to kind of look at that funding next to each other in relationship to this, I think, I think it will be helpful for the committee, because we hear about, you know, what the demand, we just want to be able to understand like what the demand is for the program and funding.
yeah. And there's programs and then there's, you know, implementation through our regular projects that Bike Ped shows up as well. There's widening of shoulders that allow for safer. So there's a lot of different ways that.
Different ways that we address it. So it's in like Bike Ped infrastructure and the transportation alternatives primarily, I think are the two.
Yeah, there's the Bike Ped grant and then, yeah.
So a couple other questions, Representative Burke and Representative Pouch.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the extra money that's going to be on top of what's already there appears as a line item where?
It will
It's a
appear,
lump, right? It's probably a lump sum.
yeah, so that would be, it would appear in the Bike Ped program in their expenditures, yeah,
In expenditures, but not in the budget.
not necessarily. yeah.
Because we've already approved the money. I mean, this is.
So it was a federal bunch of money that was somewhere.
We do an administrative adjustment essentially.
I think that was what confused us.
to move it
Yeah.
forward.
Yeah, that
And
was,
it's understandable that it would.
Yeah,
So what we'll see, I think, just to make it real, I think what we'll see is what, at the end of what was expended, and it will that be, I don't know if that will be in that, you know, we'll all become clear, we hope. Representative Pouch.
Madam Chair. The carbon reduction plan, and we had to do that for the federal government to get these funds.
We had to do it by a certain date. The
Yeah.
funding was available before, but we didn't want to put those out until we had a
Okay,
plan.
yeah, no, that
Kind of
makes
makes
sense.
sense.
Does the plan get updated every year? Like, here's
It's
what
every
we
4
did?
years.
All right. And will it measure what was gained?
There is not any requirements right now
Okay.
that they could come out with requirements for what the next round of plan has to include in it. Right now, it doesn't say like what the next plan will have to have. But we do have, there was a rulemaking in December that is just going out and actually required states to set carbon reduction, greenhouse gas emission targets, reduction targets. So there's a number, I think there's like 17 or 18 transportation performance measures that Federal Highway has out, safety, asset condition, a bunch of different things. And this is a new one for greenhouse gases. And today is the day that we're supposed to submit our targets for reduction for 2 years. We're joining the cycle of all the other transportation performance measures, which is a 4-year kind of rotation and reporting, midterm reporting on those. And so October will be when we can sort of readjust and see how we're doing on those. But it makes us, every state set a target for reductions. So there's a number of different things happening in the transportation sector for greenhouse gas emissions and looking for accountability, which makes sense if they're proposing funding for this. If they're saying this should go to this, and let's see what we're getting for results out of that.
And so just, we have already set up what our targets are. So are you just using the targets that were laid out in our, like,
It's a little different. I don't even venture to go into that right now. I mean,
Right.
they will align with that eventually, but because of the different target setting years and how that all works, it's a little bit different.
And just a follow-up. So the plan was finished last year. So you're saying in 4 years, you gotta redo the
Yeah,
plan.
every state.
Besides, there's reporting and stuff along the way.
There's not reporting
Oh.
for this, for
Okay,
the plan,
yeah.
but there is for this new,
Going forward.
yeah, the performance.
All right,
measure.
so in 4 years, we'll have a new plan.
Mhm.
And so can we expect more federal funding to continue in this
They're
way?
just starting to talk about the reauthorization right
Okay.
now, even though it's what, 2.5
Sort of
years.
expected, it's normally
Yeah.
the reauthorization typically happens,
Yes,
right?
that's the word.
So-
Maybe.
Yeah.
maybe.
history would predict
There's a lot.
that reauthorization always happens. And the formula pot of money never goes down.
Mhm.
all the extraneous stuff that was included in the IAJA has no historical precedent, and I would not even venture to speculate on what will occur in that realm.
Okay.
24 could be a big year. We'll see what happens.
Okay, so we have about 25 minutes left. Go ahead. Go
One
ahead.
real quick thing. When you, again, it sounds like this reporting and our goals, there's going to be another kind of potential misalignment with what the feds want and then with what's in ours. So this is very helpful, this format, to show how the two systems kind of talk to each other, because it just in the future, as you explain where we are with this.
Yeah, I mean, we have some reporting that we can do on the incentives programs and what that has resulted in. We just don't have history with this yet, so we don't really have any performance metrics to go on yet. But that's what we're looking to go.
I was kind of, sorry, I meant to be more specific. I was referring to the greenhouse gas emissions part, just how our own goals talk to what the state, I mean, Fed's rules are for reporting, which
Yes.
may not be happening temporarily in the same, contemporaneously.
Right, but at those target years, they should align with
Okay, good.
everything. I mean, the rule did speak to trying to align it with federal goals.
Okay, good.
They are fairly well aligned with our state goals, but it's requirements, but. So going back and sort of trying to show how the CRP funds, the program funds are supporting the programs that they're being allocated to in comparison with past funding and really what will result from those funds. I don't know if there's any questions on this slide. We're showing the 20 East Winter vans through the transit program. With $4 million, there is potential that could get us a little bit more than the 20, but we wanted to also allow for charging infrastructure.
Ross McDonald spoke a little bit to this. Yes. Was it
Tuesday, I think? Yeah.
It was this week.
Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like it could have been weeks ago, but yeah, it was this week.
And then with the same sort of slide for the MTI program. Just showing what has been put out through that program in the past years, and then what's with that $3 million bump from the carbon reduction program for state fiscal year 25. And you certainly would want to hear from Ross and Dan Courier about their plans for that.
This, I mean, from what you know, is the intent that this would last a couple of years. This is not,
I would assume so.
like, that is kind of an approach that we've taken to other
Yeah.
that we put a slug of money in that we hope will last over a couple of years. So, and we've seen how that, it's interesting to see how that number is kind of slightly bounced around a little bit over the last 5 years. So I don't think we got into this specifically into a lot of detail with Ross on this, when he was in.
Yeah, and we'll certainly be working with Ross and Dan to understand exactly what these funds are supporting. And the MTI program does have requirements for reporting on greenhouse gas reductions, and we just want to make sure what they're putting out through their grants aligns with the methodology that we have and that we're using sort of across the board. So again, hopefully being able to sort of dashboard that.
I mean, yeah, this is, and that makes a lot of sense, that the whole goal is about service and also getting people out of their.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, so the Russ delved into a little bit.
Yeah.
They want to expand out to that program, but that looks like.
Yeah.
The pilots, yeah.
And I don't have anything on the 2.5 million for electrification, but I know you have Dave Thurber planned to come in next week as well. So I'm sure part of that will be.
So that is just to be, that's I'm just flipping there. That is for the fleet electrification. That's what you're talking about.
2.5 million.
Yeah, so he's coming back in and we'll get to unpack that a little bit with him.
That's what I had for the carbon reduction program funds, and then I'm ready to move on onto protect if you all are.
Does the committee feel like there was confusion? I think this is great, the way that it's broken down, and I'm sensing from the committee that we're understanding how what happened in FY 24 and how we're gonna be able to track it.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate the chance to come back
Yeah.
and provide additional detail and stuff. I think feels like we're in a lot better spot.
I think so. I mean, I just want to say, like, you know, it's great that 4 million went in, I think, because I think we've had a lot of discussion about the value of that and how we let folks know that there's additional funding, you know, will be important to do. But yeah, I think we could, go ahead.
So I don't know if there's a question for Ross or for you, because you're talking about the grants, that's why
Yeah.
I'm bringing it up to you, but I do remember Ross saying that the funds for operations for the MTI from the carbon reduction may not be sustainable over the long run. And so does that jive with what you're learning about the grants? Is that?
I think we'd have to talk to Ross to
Yeah.
make sure we're answering your question correctly and understanding the context fully.
I mean, do we know if state fiscal year 26 is gonna have $3 million in carbon reduction program funds going to MTI? No, we don't right now.
This is what we know for these years, for
Yeah.
this, so, and I think,
I think my question is just, given that you're trying to get all of this stuff and you have a big picture of
Yeah.
carbon reduction strategies beyond transit.
Yeah.
Are you getting a sense that there's gonna be a shift in some way, away from
Well, I
this?
think another important thing to remember is that this 3 million is for state fiscal year 25, but we had sort of that 2 years of carbon reduction program that we're handing out. So, well, $4 million for transit, $4 million for bike ped. We won't have that same $12 million next year. So we'll have to just see how that all shakes out in terms of what numbers we can put towards these programs. Realizing that we were sort of catching up on 2 federal fiscal years of funding in 24. Now we're going to 1 year. Go ahead. I was leaving 60.
Oh, no, I was just.
But you're right.
I think that's sort of.
so, I mean, I think
I think I'm just concerned that if, we're trying to build these great programs and it would be comforting to know like some sense of, a fiscal plan forward to how,
I think it would
propping them
be-
up and then supporting them, but.
I think it would be good to understand a little bit better what Ross's and Dan's plans are for the MTI funds. And like you mentioned, Chair Coffey, about how those might be spread out.
I think we'll have Ross come back in to speak a little bit more in more detail about how he's planning to use the money is in the governor's proposed budget for transportation. This is the recommendation. This is a big slug of money, similar to other programs that we, like the way we have funded Replace Your Ride, like other incentives. The intent is not for it to all be used in one fiscal year, but it's spread out. So I think we need to hear a little bit more from Ross, a little bit more detail about how that would be spread out. Like, is it, I think that's a valid question. And I think from, there's no, we're in this fiscal year and this is a program that fortunately has spanned 5 years. So there's some continuity, but we don't know. And we hope that it will be reauthorized. This is not a competitive program. These are formula funds. It's not IIJA funding, which was its own special phenomenon.
Yeah, depends on how you want to define
Yeah.
how you mean by IIJ funding.
Right.
Yeah.
But for this, I mean, so I think what we're hearing, but Bradley, are you correct? Am I correct in hearing you though? It's like this is built into like part of the federal highway.
Yeah,
And
it's.
we have a better chance of it.
So, yeah, if you look at the bottom line of what we receive for formula funding, this program is included as a subset of that funding. What I'm saying, what I said to Representative Pouch is, historically speaking, the bottom line number never goes down for formula, but how that's parsed out and what subset of programs have like the carbon reduction or the protect, how they're allocated within that total formula of funding, we can't predict that. But for the next, so I think what Andrea was saying is we're kind of catching up now that we have our plans in place, our methodologies for where we want to implement these dollars. We're catching up on the early fiscal years of the IIJ formula funding in these areas. And by the time we're through our obligational period of that funding source, we need to talk to Ross for the detail, but in the general conversations, and it sounds like what he presented to your committee is that microtransit is an activity that the transit community wants to continue. And so if that's the case, I would assume that to the extent funds are available, we would have those included in our budget, right?
I just have one.
Yeah.
So the 500,000, so you're saying that for fiscal year 25, the asterisk is indicating that 3 million of the 3.5 is from the federal highway program. And so the 500,000 is state funding entirely, or is it partially carbon reduction?
I think there's,
That's both federal highway programs.
yeah, it's
3 million.
it's all a combination of the other part would be a combination of state and the federal highway block grant, just the general pool that we get.
Yeah, okay. And is it a required state matching part, or is it just like for stuff that isn't?
Yeah, it's
Like,
matching.
because
It's matching.
maybe it has to be capital versus operating expenses?
We have matching funds and typically it's for capital expenditures and not like the operating expenses of the program.
Right, and that matching funds might come from the recipients of the grants as well.
Correct.
So,
Okay. I think it's our Representative Pouch, yeah.
Thank you. We see how with the carbon reduction plan that we pivoted, in the middle of the year, the budget year, and made some decisions. Fine. And now we also see some of the money was a lump sum in the AOT, and now it's being spread out to other agencies, which makes sense.
Other programs
Other
within the
programs,
agency.
yeah.
Yes.
Oh, okay, what other
Yeah.
programs within the agency?
Yeah.
What's the decision process? Will it change on where we decide to, next year or the year after, based on the reduction plan? How are those decisions made?
those decisions are made, they should closely align with,
Yeah.
we basically said in our carbon reduction strategy, these are where the $32 million should go, these three sort of buckets of activity programs. So I don't anticipate that they would change much
Yeah.
at all. The funding amounts might change, depending on where we're at with meeting certain criteria and where we can get the most effective reductions. And so our plan, our carbon reduction strategy says pretty much evenly in those three buckets. But I think that's where, and that is based on, going back to your question, Representative Lally, we do have a prediction of what each of those will get us for carbon reductions. I think the big thing to also keep in mind is that our carbon reduction strategy wasn't just looking at greenhouse gas emissions reductions, it was looking at other co-benefits that can come from these funds as well. We will likely stick to those sort of three programs. Yeah.
And I think it's important just to remind the committee, like, we do have that report, and in that report, the analysis showed that there's still a gap, like in terms of us reaching, we had the Climate Action Office, we had a lot of testimony on that day that showed that, like, we need another tool in the toolbox. I think there's agreement, to remind the committee, our goals are grounded in the Global Warming Solutions Act requirements and in the Climate Action Plan that is updated every 4 years. We're due for an update coming up soon. So these strategies that Andrea is working on is in alignment with that. And the committee heard that we need to, that there, in that report, that there's another strategy that's needed, because the initial climate plan that was submitted in 2021, 10 days before, like, one of the big tools was exploring what would be to be involved with the TCI, which is the Transportation Climate Initiative program.
And I know Cap Invest.
It was a cap invest, and that 10 days before it was in the final editing, and that was included, that whole coalition fell apart. And nothing that, I would say, nothing that Vermont did. So in the past few years, it's like, how do we get another tool in the toolbox to do that? So I think that's still out there, and the committee's going to be talking about a minute about more of that, but it's alongside this. Is that fair to say? Like,
Absolutely.
so, but the recommendations that you had in the climate plan were the carbon reduction strategy were in these buckets that you really first started out with. But we know that there's more work, like, it's great that we have this funding to do it, but we know that there's more work to be done, that this doesn't solve that. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Yeah. And the climate, and we received in that testimony that there was an addendum, January 2024, just a few weeks ago, an addendum made to the climate action plan that's making a recommendation that I believe, like, that is about how we can move forward with, like, a process and funding to look at what it would be to have standing, there are other cap and invest programs and there are other tools to look at a comprehensive look. And my understanding is, because that was approved by the Climate Council, which is comprised of members of the Agency of Transportation, ANR, and other groups, that there was an agreement there. So I think I don't mean to be taking up so much of our time, but I think it's important to remind the committee that there is kind of some good coming together happened around that addendum, that it represents a lot of people are on the same page about a next step in a process that will be in addition to this work.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. That was a great explanation.
Oh, well. I'm trying
Good understanding of what's going
to
on.
synthesize, like, that there are a few things going on in a few.
Right. And that does align with section 24 of your proposed page 693.
Right, exactly. Thank you for sharing that. And we're going to have Michelle come back in, and it is that section 24. So we'll put a pause on that, because we'll be talking about that today, but I appreciate you kind of tying that back in. Great. So I think we want to give you time to talk about the Protect program if the committee's ready to go there. So.
Okay. Again, you saw the slide in the last week's presentation, really just an overview. That we did a resilience improvement plan. That came up with a prioritized list of locations throughout our infrastructure to try to address resilience at. Important thing about that plan is that by addressing, if we were to address those projects listed as priorities through that plan, we get an increased federal match. So it's 90-10 instead of 80-20. So
That's good.
Right. Yep. So for the state fiscal year 25 funds, and a reminder, we have not shown anything but planning funds. State fiscal year 24 had some planning funds, and state fiscal year 25, again, in that little side call out box there, that's what the environmental policy and sustainability program we're looking at implementing for planning funds with the Protect dollars. The implementation, this is the first time state fiscal year 25 that we're looking at implementation funds, and we're proposing $3.7 million for implementation funds. That our first step really was to look at which projects from our resilience improvement plan prioritized locations aligned with our capital program, because the guidance allows for incremental costs of those types of projects. And so that's where we first started. And that 3.7 million represents that allocation. And so I'm going to move on to this slide because it's a little bit more, again, more detail, more description about how these funds have been apportioned to us and how we've obligated them, and then what we are looking at for planning. So I will pause and sort of let you take a few minutes to look that over, because again, it's a lot of information. We can have some discussion on it.
All right, so I'm seeing how the money's tied into specific projects that are in the white book, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, those are listed on the right. Yeah.
Yeah, in the right-hand column for this fiscal year.
Yeah, Coventry's already been advertised and they're moving along.
So I think this is fair to say, this is the result, like when we talk about resiliency infrastructure, this is where we're seeing it showing up
Yes.
in the capital program, transportation.
This
capital.
is where we're showing the protect funds showing. I mean, we could talk a lot about other programs and other funding that definitely promote resilience throughout our agency. There's a lot of programs and a lot of what we do because of our updated standards, design standards that promote resiliency just in our normal course of the way we design projects. So this certainly isn't the only funding in the agency that's going towards resilience. But these are the IIJA funds that are dedicated to that.
I don't see any questions about this of people understanding. So for in our state fiscal year 25, we're gonna see $3.7 million of protect funds going in. I see Representative Burke, you have a question?
Thank you. Just to clarify, I'm assuming like the other, like we discussed before, all this is on top of what would have been normal programming.
Well, these are a little different because they are going towards incremental costs of an already planned project for these funds.
Okay,
And that's, the guidance does allow for that.
all right. But it's probably more money than we would have to put into the project. Given the,
For these
Given the
three
amount of
projects
money.
were planned already. They're in our capital program. They were planned.
okay,
And then, you know, per the guidance, we're allowed to put these protect funds to the incremental costs of the portion of the project that is specifically related to resilience. We had a way of determining that incremental cost. So sort of the rest of the cost, just because it's an asset that needs to be replaced. And then there's certain costs associated with the projects that are widening the span, making it more resilient to future events.
understood, thank you.
Yeah, maybe. Where do we find those three projects? Is there something that points to them?
I think
They're in the white book.
I'm in the
Yeah.
white book, and those are the project numbers.
Bridge. What's it called?
Yes.
What's that? It's the last one.
No, they're
STP.
they're all
They're all
structures.
structures.
They're bridges, yeah, depending on
Trying to read
the code.
the code,
Yeah.
yeah.
So the Coventry BF, that's a code for the bridge project.
Yeah.
And the Wilmington NH culvert is a culvert project. And the Shasbury STP, I should know.
State transportation.
I think that's a bridge.
It is,
project.
it's from Carolyn Coded program.
Yeah.
There's some thought you get to walk through the white book again.
Well, yeah, to find them, right? Yeah. I mean, I would think maybe on this page where it talks about environmental policy and sustainability, it might say that's for those projects, you know, you'll find them in those projects.
The method I use is I open if you go to the V-Trans capital program, you go to the full PDF and do a control F of those data points, it'll shoot you right to it.
Really?
Yeah, that's a hack for everybody here.
We don't have to hold our binder everywhere we go.
Yes.
Okay.
I think I'm not seeing more questions, but.
And just the last slide I have is just, we have a few other categories of work that we are taking part in for the environmental policy and sustainability, and that shows in our proposed budget. obviously, we talked about the mileage-based user fee grant. We expect that announcement in the near future. Again, we've been doing a lot of work over the last year or two to position ourselves well for that grant. Patrick can certainly provide more detail on that when he's in next week, if that's of interest. Let's see. And then for energy, we provided some resources to focus some of our capacity on energy. And that is, we just have been so busy with these other programs. We'd like to do a little bit more on this energy stuff and whether or not we sort of reopen our 2016 solar plan or what that looks like, and just looking at opportunities for solar within our right of way and or at our facilities and how that could work. And just looking at our energy usage across our facilities. And because of the transportation sector, we used to do transportation energy profile. And now EAN does a profile. The comprehensive energy plan is sort of looking at that. So we're taking a pause on reproducing that because other entities already are. And we're trying to put some of those resources in. Again, this will be part of our dashboarding that we're looking at to try to explain how our transportation sector impacts energy usage as well. And then we have just general environmental support where we dedicate some of our staff time to supporting other environmental programs throughout the agency and the initiatives that they are working on. So that could be water quality, contaminated soils, road ecology, really pretty small amount of our staff time going to that, but just supporting it from a planning perspective rather than the other programs are more on an implementation kind of side.
I know that you got a really wonderful federal grant around wildlife to promote
Yes.
wildlife crossings. And I think, how does that fit into the work? Is that the general environmental?
Well, like our staff time would help to support something like that. And we have worked on that a little bit with the environmental program in the in PDB in the highway division. But those funds for that would show up again in the project itself, in the funding for that project.
Yeah.
Not running environmental programs.
Yeah, and that was one of the programs. Like when we talk about the discretionary or competitive type programs of the IHA, that was a small portion of that. Yeah. Not the entire project. I mean, a small portion of all the discretionary spending, because it's like another cost, but
Yeah.
It was nice. You got some nice press on that project too.
yeah.
Yeah, hopefully, our design of that will help us, put us in a good position for applying for implementation funds on that too. So hopefully in future rounds of discretionary grants, we can use that to our advantage. And This is just our little group.
Yeah, it's grown. Yeah.
Little matching icon for each of us.
Yeah. I like. That's great.
We're just focusing on resilience, and he has a goose. So like sometimes when you're on the phone, you'll hear his dog barking or you'll hear his goose talking. Oh, that's fine. Okay.
It's a goose.
No, he has a pet goose.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That is nice to know.
Yeah, it's a 5-person, 1-car family, and it's an electric vehicle. He is walking what he's preaching here. Yeah. Hillary just joined us from ECCD. She's got a lot of outreach experience and helping Patrick with our EV charging. She just got back from Japan, so she's a mountain girl. She was snowboarding out there. I like to ride my bike a lot. And Ari's gonna help us save the planet for sure. She's got a lot of greenhouse gas inventory and a lot of interest in just natural resources and resiliency as well. So yeah, got a good rounded out team now, so it's great.
Great, that's great. Well, thank you for coming back in and to do this. I think answered a lot of our questions. So, and appreciate it.
Great, thank you.
And since Bradley was gonna be here, we thought we would just yeah. You were gonna
Yeah.
Okay.
slide into the next favorite topic. So we wanted to, just, I think the committee, Bradley, thanks for extending your time with us
Sure.
this morning, to talk about a little bit about the 25 million that was fenced off last year in FY 24. It was a big part of the budget discussions in this committee and in the appropriations committees last year with the administration. So, and it was, the idea was that the state dollars to leverage IIJA funds. So just help us understand how we see it in the, maybe take the big picture look, and then how would you like to do this? And are there any documents that we should be?
Yeah, so it was, yesterday afternoon, I got the request and I was thinking.
Yeah,
last
sorry
night-
for the last
That's
night.
okay, it's okay, not a problem. So I was thinking, what's a way to kind of demonstrate the way in which we use that 25 million, if I would start there. And then I sent a copy to Jeannie just this morning. I can get all this stuff to you later, but maybe I'll just show it.
Yeah, that's
And
great.
we'll just have a conversation and I can follow up with specifics at another time.
I think that sounds great, because I think the committee might have questions too, that you can just, that you can answer for us.
So first technical question, Jeannie, can I get the Zoom link?
If you.
Oh, wait, maybe I have it. No, I have it right here.
Oh, okay, because otherwise you could, if you have the right connector, you.
I don't have it right.
I know, I don't have that
Thingy.
computer either, so, yeah.
So let's do this. Spreadsheet. Okay, so
You just need to mute, you just need to mute. yourself,
Apologize.
That's all, that's we.
thought I did.
Yeah.
Okay, I am now. So,
And I think you did send us some documents, right, like that we have on our webpage, is it this?
One page.
so I sent.
Is that yep, we're looking at it, yep, we have that in ours.
So yeah, I got this, was thinking, what's a good way to look at the budget? Oops, let's zoom in. And how we distribute our state funds throughout both our agency needs, how we utilize it for match and other things. So I put together a pretty simple accounting last night of, I think it kind of walks through our basic methodology each year when we're reviewing how to put together our governor's recommended budget as well. So we start with the agency payroll, fixed cost and maintenance operations. That's our biggest piece of the puzzle of how we allocate our state funds every fiscal year. So this would include all of the agency's staff costs, keeping the lights on in all of the buildings, all of our various, fixed costs related to our IT stuff that we need to do, all of our systems, things of that nature. And in this, I also included any of the portions of maintenance operation that don't have a small, teeny little IIJA component, which is the vast majority of the program, almost 100%. And so that's all included in what I would say is our kind of starting point for running an agency of transportation in Vermont, right? And next down the list, we look at what are our obligations to our town highway programs, and we factor that into our equation. And that's another source of use of our state funds. And the third down the list is what are the state fund obligations that we have for our kind of non-AOT items that we need to fund every year, which would be like the JTOG transfer, which we've discussed at length. We do give some money to the BGS info centers and small pots to other places. And so we kind of take that off the top. And then what we're left with is the amount of funds that we put in our capital program, either to, in the first line, our public transit, our rail, our aviation, that's separate from the IIJA because they're different federal entities that we interact with. And there's some fungibility in that number. There could be small portions of that number that should belong in the IIJA bucket before ease of use. I made them distinct. So our transit, rail, and aviation authority, let's just kind of count them off to the side for now. And so the final remaining part is what are the state funds we have available to match our federal formula grants in our capital program, primarily through the highways program. And what you're showing there is about what we would expect, and it's about the expected number that we get to just about every year we do this exercise is around $50-60 million. In fiscal 25 governor's recommended budget, we had one added component, which is all of the match related to the FHWA emergency relief projects of about $5 million that we had to put towards the projects that were damaged and need to be permanently repaired from the July flooding. So that's kind of an anomaly for fiscal 25 as compared to fiscal 24. So I put all this together to demonstrate that the 25 million of that was in Act 78 of last year set aside for match in fiscal 25 and 26 is incorporated primarily in that $57,114,000 line item. Like I said, there's probably small portions from my very basic accounting here that are sprinkled elsewhere, but primarily that's where it goes, and it equates to approximately $142 million total of program and project expenditures. We were, I'll say one last thing and then I'll pause for a minute. We were in House Appropriations this morning and they asked us for a further breakout of that IIJA number to show of the capital projects that we have in the White Book that have an IIJA component, which ones are part of your formula funding and which ones are the sort of discretionary or competitive granting opportunities that we're projecting into our budget. So I'll prepare a breakdown, and I was thinking, I'm sure this committee and Senate Transportation will be happy to review that as well.
I think that'd be.
So I think that's the next step in I think communicating to you all exactly what the breakout of that funding is demonstrating, one, that the entirety of it does fit into our state match for IIJA as a whole in the capital program. And step two, which I'll be able to provide for you at a later date, would be of that, what portion is for our regularly scheduled programming through our formula funding, and what portions of that are part of our discretionary granting opportunities. And I'll stop now for this sheet.
This is helpful, and what could, I'm just curious, like we get our transportation on the page, which is that our joint fiscal office puts together. And I think this is helpful to see how do we track, like it's last year's money.
Yeah.
And so how do we pull it out? Can we pull it out in a separate line? I'm just not seeing where that hits the page. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I put this together last night. What I think I'll do is I'll share it with Logan.
Okay.
And I have a really ugly looking spreadsheet full of colors and whatnot. And I can demonstrate how all this connects together, and I'll share it with Logan, and then maybe he can help.
I think that'd be good for
Yeah.
other committee members, that makes sense, just to see, like, because I think part of, like, that's last year's money, like, you
Yeah.
know, from the FY 20, so just to see that that's separated out and to see
Yeah, it's primarily gonna show up
the state.
in the state, in the program development area, in those programs that aren't program development administration, so all the ones above that. It's gonna be the primary area where it is. But I have like I said, a discrete accounting that I can share with Logan, and you can maybe help integrate the budget on a page that you all have, and that does all tick and tie. Thankfully.
And I think I want others to ask their questions too, but, you know, I'm curious to see, like, you know, it's almost like, where did the IIJA money, I mean, this is the big question that we even had this last year, right? Before we're talking about the 25 million, like, where is that money going? How, we do know that we have taken federal money to, you know, substitute in to free up some, you know, state dollars. But this 25 million now that we're looking at here is that those very precious, flexible state dollars. So we're trying to figure out, like, what's it getting us? And you said 25 million gets us an additional, or I wouldn't say, I'll take out the word.
Not an additional
Yeah, it's
total.
$142 million in program project expenditures. And I think there was some interest in the committee to see, like, so are there specific projects that it's helping?
Yeah, like that wildlife crossing that you mentioned would be among them, right? For example, and I think we have some other projects too. I am, you know, prior to the governor's budget recommendation, he invited me in and I was prepared to talk about a particular thing and then realized I can't really talk about that yet. And I would be happy to come back and talk to you specifically about that. And I can show kind of the specific grants that we are after and the ways in which they correlate into the budget. And I think that's kind of what I was saying before, that House Appropriations had asked for. I think the Senate Transportation Committee has asked me for that. So I'm going to put all that package together and I'll share it with you.
And then we'll share with me, and then we'll find a time to
And we'll find a time to dive into it. But I think that'll illuminate where this funding is, you know, where this money is specifically going. And I know it is very important dollars because it originated in the general fund, right? And so,
exactly.
you know, it is, even though it was appropriated in last year's budget, it still is in the mix, right, of discussion. And so we really want to be clear in how we can demonstrate the use of these funds.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah.
So I think probably let me know when that's ready and then we'll get you in committee to talk about that. Are there any other things that the committee would like to see in that from Bradley at this point? Sure.
Yeah, and the other thing I was going to include in that is, you recall the last few years, I've come in here and I've said, the Infrastructure Improvement and Jobs Act happened. Here's what we're going to need over the course of years. I have an update to that, and
that would be very, that would be very helpful.
Yeah, I just need to confer with my engineers and make sure I got everything right, and then we'll be good.
Well, great. We only asked you to come in yesterday, so I didn't expect you to have a big PowerPoint ready, but this is, I think this helps us knowing and knowing you hearing the things that the committee is interested in.
Yeah, it's helpful for me to have a conversation, so I appreciate any opportunity to.
I'm seeing a question percolate. Is there a question over here, Representative Walker?
Well, when it comes to the time to, thank you, it's sort of there was a lot of discussions about this amount of money and how much more would be needed if there were other projects there were sort of projects at risk lists and things. The 25 million wasn't the amount of money that was asked for in last year's budget. It was less than what was asked for. Is there Is it better to start talking about that now or waiting for that to hit later? Like in that same thing, you're putting together what we're leveraging the money for. Is there a list of what we are also down the road and the things you've asked for, things are
Yeah.
coming? Are there projects at risk list that we should be getting sooner than
So
later as we build our budget?
what I'll say is we had, last year, this is in reference to the governor's recommended budget had within it approximately $70 million of general fund use for transportation related projects. By the end of the session, the as passed budget included revenue increases plus this 25 million, which about equated to the same. So I don't know if that helps answer your
It
question.
was 70, the us was 70 million over 2 fiscal years.
Yeah, so it'd be in relation to they're equatable in dollars to dollars. Every year we go along, we learn more about our specific programming needs and our asset inputs, which, you know, changes the list that you referred to of the project. So I don't know what list we would provide at this point in time, but when there is such a time, or if there is such a time, we will be able to generate that. Used to it.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you, Bradley, for coming in. And we look forward to having you back.
Yeah. See you soon.
Yeah, great. Thanks for responding to our last minute request to come in. So that's great. So with that, we're actually done a few minutes early. So I want to give it a few extra minutes for lunch.
Everybody can announce.
Sure.
I would just like to introduce you to committee, former
Yeah.
transportation member Mary Sullivan,
Yes.
Burlington,
Thank you, Representative Bertha.
longtime transportation committee member, and then had another iteration of service here on the Natural Resources Committee.
Sure.
I don't know, well,
But I just have to say, that roundabout in Burlington, I think you should take a field trip up.
Little round and round.
That's great.
The Oak Ridge Park one?
So what I'm gonna do, we can visit, but I'm gonna end our live stream, okay? So we're still